So now here we are in front of one of the most photographed homes in New Orleans. It is this pinkish house right here on the corner. It is considered a 3.5-story home because of that shorter story on top. Now, our story about this house starts back in the late 1800s when a man came into our city who spoke with a foreign accent. He was looking for a house to lease for his boss, who he claimed was the Sultan of Turkey. Now, he procured this house on the corner, and shortly after, a ship docked down at the docks. Off that ship came a harem of girls and treasures, boxes with gold and jewels, guards with swords on their hips, and lastly came the Sultan. Now, they paraded that from the river straight down this street around the corner into that house. Once they got inside that house, they threw up heavy draperies, they bolted the door and locked the gate, and they did not come back out. The people of New Orleans, they were a little curious. There were people in this city, they spoke a foreign language. They were obviously partying. They could tell by the sounds that came out of that house. The music, the laughter, the smell of incense and opium. But they never left that house and had anything to do with the citizens of the city. Now, this went on for months and months. And then one night we had a dark storm blow in over the city. At the same time, a ship docked down at Barataria Bay, but no one saw anybody crewing the ship or get on or off the ship. The next morning, when the storm left, the ship was also gone. A man walked down the sidewalk past the house and he stopped because of the strange sound coming out of the house. It was complete silence. He turned the corner, got to the front steps, and noticed there was blood running down the steps. Now, he does what we all here in New Orleans do. He kept walking. But he did get the police. The police came to the house. They did not get an answer at the door, so they broke the door down and went inside. And once inside, they found everyone slaughtered. There were bodies in every room of the house, but nowhere could they find the Sultan. They knew they were in trouble. We had a foreign dignitary, and he is now missing in our city. So they had to continue searching. They make their way out to the courtyard, and in that courtyard, they found a freshly dug grave. And from that grave, there was a hand that had tried to dig its way out of that grave. And a warning to all traitors to beware, you would get what you deserve. So now the police were really worried. Now we have a murdered dignitary in this city, and we need to find out what happened. So, upon doing research to find out what happened inside this palace, they found out that the Sultan of Turkey was in Turkey, very much alive. But his younger brother, who stole the Sultan's wife, treasure, guards, and harem, and moved to New Orleans into this house so that he could live his life out in obscurity, was not. The ship that docked down at Barataria, that was the Sultan's assassins. They were sent here to send a message to anyone who would ever betray him again. Now, this building is apartment buildings, and the people that live here claim that late at night you can still sometimes see the Sultan's younger brother in that courtyard standing mournfully over his own grave. Some of us here in the city believe that that is possible because with the curse that was there beside the grave, he was forbidden to ever return home again. So his soul was stuck here in our city, mourning his own death. So now we have stopped in front of the most haunted house in New Orleans. The gray house here on the corner is the Lalaurie Mansion. In the 1830s, Delphine Lalaurie and her husband, Dr. Louis Lalaurie, bought and moved into this house. She had already survived 2 husbands that were wealthy and came from a wealthy family. Dr. Louis Lalaurie was fresh out of medical school. She was also 19 years older than him. So when they moved into this house, she would throw parties. One night while throwing a party, a fire broke out in the kitchen behind the house across the courtyard. When the fire and the police showed up about the fire in the kitchen, they went there and they found a 70-year-old slave woman chained to the stove. When they tried to rescue the woman, she told them to let her be, that she had set the fire to escape, going to the second floor where no one ever returned. Upon checking out the second floor, they found numerous of her slaves starved, beaten, and tortured. When the police came down from the second floor to arrest the Lalauries, they were gone. They had escaped. Eventually went to New York, got on a ship, went back to France, lived the rest of their life out there until death. Now, we do suspect after death that Madame Delphine Lalaurie was brought back into this city and buried in St. Louis Cemetery number 1. Of course, with the way we bury people, there is no evidence to prove or disprove that. This house got destroyed in the fire and it was rebuilt. Originally, it would have been 2 stories. The third one was added later. This has been many things: a girls' conservatory of music. It has been apartments. It has been a furniture store. And now it is a private residence. One little fact about this house is at one time it was owned by actor Nicolas Cage until he fell upon hard times and it was auctioned off. So here we are at 715 Ursuline Street, and we are going to talk about the first of 3 murders that happened on this street. Now, in the 1920s, there was a lot of revelry in the city of New Orleans. There was liquor, prohibition, jazz music. People were in a good time party mood. Some of the people that lived in this building up on the top floor, Joseph and Henry Moiety and their wives, they were brothers. They liked to party, drink, and celebrate too. Well, a little bit of an issue happened and Joseph did leave the apartment, go stay with his sister, and left his wife Teresa here. Now, one night when Henry come home, they started drinking. He started suspecting that his wife was having a little fling with the businessman who ran the business on the ground floor. Being drunk, he flew into a rage and he killed his wife and his sister-in-law. Murder wasn't good enough, though. He then chopped their body parts off, placed them in a trunk, and left. On October 27th, the maid come to this house, went upstairs, was going to open the door and clean as she always did. And when she opened the door, she found herself standing in a pool of blood. Upon seeing that, she ran out into the street. She got the police. The police came here and they found blood everywhere upon inspecting the building. They did find Joseph Moiety, who turned himself in and said, "Look, I wasn't even living in the house at the time." 2 weeks later, some shoremen working at the docks turned in Henry Moiety, who was then arrested. He was convicted, sentenced to 2 life sentences, 1 for each of the murders. But he gained the trust of the prison system. He was sent on an errand one day to the post office, and then he made his escape. He was eventually caught in Chicago and brought back to Louisiana, where he was imprisoned in Angola. But for some strange reason, they shortened his sentence, and he got out very quickly. He then went to California, where he was arrested again for shooting his then girlfriend. He was sent to Folsom City Prison, and there he died shortly after. We are going to continue on down Ursuline's Avenue because there are 2 more true crime stories on this same block. So now we are at 725 Ursuline's Avenue. And here in the late 1900s, we had some German immigrants move into this house. They also moved their business in here. They were German sausage makers. After working here for a while, their business grew and they hired an employee. She was very spelty and the husband liked her very much, but the wife did not. So the wife told him, finally, you get rid of her. He was on the verge of doing so when the worker told him, what we need to do is get rid of your wife and then we can be together all the time. So they did. Well, the guilt of what he had done to his wife drove him insane. They showed up at the house. He was screaming, he was yelling, and he contributed it to a breakdown over his wife's disappearance. And then shortly after that, people started finding pieces of bone, pieces of tooth, pieces of cloth in their sausage. He eventually broke down, admitted to what he'd done, that he had killed his wife, and they ended up putting him in a sanatorium. There he remained for the rest of his life, mumbling gibberish and not able to ever utter another coherent sentence again. That is the second true crime story we have on this one block, and now we will continue to the third. So now here we are at 735 Ursulines Avenue, and it is the most recent of our true crime stories here. In 2002, there was a man named John living here with his girlfriend, both of which worked at the end of the block at Quartermaster Delis. Now, the girlfriend, she was a little bohemian, a little bit gypsy, and she was getting a little tired of living here and doing the same thing over and over. She had mentioned that she would like to move away. Well, then all of a sudden, she ended up missing. She didn't show up for work. The people at the deli called and said, hey, what's going on? John told them that she simply got in a car accident, was in the hospital. So they wanted to know what room so that they could go visit her, send her some cards and flowers. And he would not tell them. He said she was in the ICU, could not have any gifts or visitors. He ended up leaving work at the deli as well. And then what happened got even stranger. He claimed that she had moved away to go find herself, but that he was getting texts and emails from her all the time. As a matter of fact, she had a sister who was also getting texts and emails from her, but nobody had ever actually talked to her or seen her. And then eventually, John moved away over to Elysian Fields with his new girlfriend in a building that was owned by her parents. So in October of 2005, after Katrina, the girlfriend's parents called up John and his girlfriend and asked what to do with the trunks that were stored in their property. John said, oh, just throw the 2 trunks away. I don't need them anymore. The girlfriend's father went down, was going to throw the trunks away. One of the trunks had fallen over and it was open and it was full of coats and blankets. The other trunk was locked. So the girlfriend's father took a crowbar, popped the trunk open, and he was astonished by what was inside. He found the body of a woman. Now, after Katrina in October, things were still a mess, but the police did come down. They took some DNA samples from that body and they had to send them off to Tennessee because none of our crime labs were working here. It took 2 years until 2007 to get the results of those tests back. After the results of the tests come back, it was found out that it was John's former girlfriend, whom he led everybody to believe had left him, moved away to find herself. Now, John was eventually arrested for this crime in 2009, and he is in Angola prison today, still from the charges of this crime. So, moral of the 3 stories on this block is never rent a place on the 700 block of Ursuline Avenue, especially if the house number ends in 5.